Hi, and welcome back to this edition of Focal Point on AFR Talk. Brian Fisher is my name. Talking here about gays in the military. And to go back to the first hour, we talked with Elaine Donnelly, president of the Center for Military Readiness, talking about the skyrocketing rate of male-on-male sexual assault in the United States military. Now, all the newspaper stories that you're going to see are all about these male-on-female sexual assaults, and they're terrible. They're horrible. They're very bad. They're no good. That's why I do not believe we should have women in the military. To have women in the military in uniform, sharing these very intense circumstances, these intimate arrangements, these barracks and other kind of training settings with people of the opposite sex, it's a recipe for disaster. People that think they're not going to have problems are clueless about human nature. Absolutely clueless, blind, gullible, naive, whatever you want to say it, foolish about human nature. So you're going to have sexual assaults. Got a story in the stack about a cadet at West Point, a member of the military at West Point, taking videotapes of female cadets in the shower. All right, well, there you wouldn't have that. You wouldn't have these female cadets being spied on, videotaped, if they weren't even at West Point to begin with. So it's just so anyway, it's just insanity to me. You have these policies, and we have seen now. And this is the Fisher factoid for the day. There are more males who are victims of sexual assault in the United States military than females. That is the Fisher factoid of the day. It's even in the New York Times. You got to hunt to find it, but it's in there. More males are victims of sexual assault in the military today than females. It is a true fact. Anyway, Bill, you were telling us a story. Back up to where this meeting was called and take it from there.
Okay, it was a commander's call, unscheduled commander's call. We were, and it was around 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I remember that. And the first sergeant took over and walked to the podium. He excused every officer from being in the place. Now, you had just non-commissioned officers and enlisted men. He said, we had a problem in the squadron. We have a homosexual. Now, that was not put up with back in those days. He said, I want that person deemed unfit for military service by the end of business today, or else we'll have another call tomorrow, and nobody here will like what's going to go on.
Wow.
So that was our United States military and the way we handled it.
Yeah.
So nobody talks about that.
Yeah, and it's interesting, Bill. You go back to George Washington, the first commander-in-chief, Continental Army back in 1775, and one of the first things that Washington had, well, I don't know if it was one of the first, but early in his command, there were two soldiers that were caught doing what homosexuals do in camp. And he literally, Bill, had them drummed out of the Continental Army. He had everybody lined up in 2 rows, had the drummers beating on the drums, and these two homosexuals had to march down the middle of those rows out of the Army forever. So that's been the policy of the Army since day one. All right, Bill, listen up. Okay, appreciate the story, Bill. Thank you for that. Very illustrative. And that wasn't that long ago, where that policy was still clear. And it had to do with unit cohesion, it had to do with morale, it had to do with readiness, the whole 9 yards. Let's go to Rebecca, Rogers, Arkansas. Rebecca, welcome to Focal Point with Brian Fisher. What's on your mind?
Hi, Brian. Thank you. Appreciate so much your good work.
Thank you.
In connection with the foster mom being penalized, 100 days in jail.
Yeah, 100 days in prison.
Punishment. Yes.
Yeah, 100 days. They sent her to the big house. She went to the big house.
Yes. I had some foster care papers. I was supposed to be a babysitter in a long sheaf of paperwork for these people who were trying to become foster parents in Northwest Arkansas. Part of my questions that I had to answer, they said that we could not use any corporal punishment for any child in our care. Mm-hmm. The foster care people couldn't, the babysitters couldn't, which, of course, I object to. I started teaching in 73, and we were spanking when a child deserved it. The parents supported that. It was good policy.
Yeah, you'd get spanked at school, Rebecca. Yeah. Then you'd get home and get spanked again. I mean, parents were not going to put up with that kind of misconduct.
Yeah, and there was good discipline. good respect for teachers and authority. And then by the time I quit teaching to have children in 78, we were having to sign a paper that said we'd given a spanking during the day, and we had to have a witness for our protection. The schools thought it was still a good thing, but they wanted to protect us.
Yeah, and that's
And
fine.
I guess Dr. Benjamin Spock
Oh, boy.
was a part of the movement
Oh, yeah.
that made it a horrid thing to spank.
Yeah, they turned he turned biblical discipline basically into a crime. And, you look at the Proverbs has many verses about the importance and the role of corporal punishment, corporal discipline. It's a necessary tool in raising children to maturity. In fact, what the Proverb says, what Solomon says, is folly is bound up in the heart of a child. The rod drives it far from him. Now, we're not talking about hauling off and wailing on children or abusing them, breaking their bones or breaking the skin or anything of the sort. It's just appropriate, measured, but firm corporal discipline has an amazingly salutary effect on the value system of a child. In fact, the proverb says, if you withhold corporal discipline from a child that needs it, it's a form of hatred. If you love your child, you will discipline him appropriately because you want him to connect disobedience with pain. That's one of the things. You don't want your kid to learn that thing the hard way. You want them to understand if you disobey, it results in pain. If you sow to the flesh, you shall from the flesh reap corruption. Corporal discipline is one of the ways to make that connection in the mind of a child. Disobedience, rebellion results in pain. All right. Well, listen, Rebecca, I appreciate the call. Thank you very much for that. Let's go to Fender in Brook Hill, Missouri. Fender, welcome. What's on your mind?
Well, I'm commenting on the lady going to prison for 100 days also.
Yeah, to the big house for using a wooden spoon. Same thing that my wife and I did while our kids were growing up.
It's a shame because spanking, because of Dr. Spock and other not so bright individuals, has really cost our children their joy in their life and finding God even.
Yeah.
My wife and I have 10 kids. We've fostered over 24 others. We've adopted 8 and have 2 of our own. And, yeah, the state says you cannot put corporal punishment on them. And it's hard to sometimes get past a little stubbornness.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and it says here, this is Proverbs 13:24, whoever spares the rod hates his son, but he who loves him is diligent. That is, he's wise, he's smart about it. He does it when it's appropriate. He is diligent to discipline him.
We have to rely on other means, removal of privileges, the kind of
mm-hmm.
that they get. And honestly, but the sad fact is some of our kids that we've got are real hard abuse cases, and so spanking a child, inflicting pain upon them, I can understand how you can see it from the other side, just because these kids have really been through torture.
Yeah, and I'll bet you they've never experienced discipline that was administered in love. It probably always was administered with explosive anger and temper. It probably was abusive, and so it probably inflicted quite a bit of psychological harm on them.
And it did. We are constantly working with counselors and trying to stabilize these children, but it's to the effect of almost post-traumatic stress.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
For some of these kids.
Yeah. All right. Well, listen, Fender, I appreciate the call. Thank you very much, and God's best to you and your wife for the kind of love you're showing to not just your own children, but other children who have come out of pretty bad situations. I want to play a couple of sound bites. Let's grab soundbite number 2, Rob, while we're at it. Let's grab soundbite number 2 while we're on the Ted Cruz theme. I just love this. Ted Cruz, ladies and gentlemen, is the man. Ted Cruz is the man. We just heard what he said about this boondoggle of an amnesty bill. And by the way, on that, on the whole business of welfare, No, they're not going to get welfare. They can't get welfare. We're going to keep them off of welfare. Well, an amendment was passed, or it was presented in the committee, that would deny earned income tax credit benefits to illegal immigrants who would be legalized under this bill. So here's a bill. Okay, you say no welfare benefits to illegal aliens. Okay, great. Well, let's make this clear. Let's make it explicit. Let's say that they're not going to be eligible for the earned income tax credit. That's the deal where you can get money back from the government even though you haven't paid it in. It's a huge welfare scheme. It's a huge involuntary transfer of wealth. According to The Hill, a low-income family with 2 kids can receive up to $5,372 in credit, sometimes exceeding the amount it pays in taxes. We've done the stories before, $4 billion being sent out to these illegal alien families right now that are collecting it. They're in the country illegally. They've got a house set up with an address. They're getting and they got 20 people they claim are living there and eligible for this income tax credit. Here is Ted Cruz talking about how he feels about both Democrats and Republicans. Listen to this.
Senior senator from Arizona urged this body to trust the Republicans. Let me be clear, I don't trust the Republicans, and I don't trust the Democrats. And I think a whole lot of Americans likewise don't trust the Republicans and the Democrats because it is leadership in both parties that has gotten us in this mess.
Now, Ted Cruz, man, he is getting right up in John McCain's grill. He's getting right up in John McCain's kitchen. John McCain does not like it. He's not used to having these little whippersnappers who haven't done their time and paid their dues going to Washington, D.C. and doing the job of representing their constituents. He doesn't like it one little bit. But there's Ted Cruz. He says, look, I don't trust Republicans any more than I trust Democrats. And, you know, if you're like me, you hear that, you say, you go, Ted. That's my man. I don't trust these Republicans either. I'm calling them Naga hide conservatives. Naga hide, you know, is fake leather. So it's like they're Democrats. I mean, they're Republicans. They're supposed to be represented by the donkey, which has got this tough skin. But it's Naga hide. It's fake leather with a vinyl lining. Naga hide conservatives, and Ted Cruz doesn't like him any more than you and I do. Focal Point, AFR Talk, back in 2.